You're just a babysitter, not family. Those words cut deeper than any knife could. But what I discovered afterward made me realize my daughter-in-law wasn't just cruel, she was dangerous. And the choice I made next changed everything. I'm grateful you're here with me today. Stay until the end and drop a comment with your city so I can see how far this story travels. I never imagined that at 73 years old, my own son would let his wife treat me like disposable help. The first rays of dawn were just breaking over the Cascade Mountains when my alarm went off at 5:45 a.m. I'd been awake for 20 minutes already, staring at the ceiling of my small apartment in Bellevue, Washington, mentally preparing for another day that would stretch from before sunrise until well after dark. At 73, I should have been sleeping in, maybe waking naturally around 8, enjoying a leisurely breakfast while reading the newspaper. Instead, I was pulling on comfortable clothes suitable for chasing after a 4-year-old and a 6-year-old, gulping down instant coffee that never tasted quite right, and checking my phone for any last-minute changes to the schedule. No new messages. That meant the plan was still the same: arrive at my son's house in Medina by 6:30 a.m., get the children fed and dressed, pack their lunches, and have them ready for school by 7:45. Then I'd do the breakfast cleanup, start a load of laundry, tidy the playroom that somehow became a disaster zone every single day, and begin preparing ingredients for dinner before picking up the kids at 3:15. I locked my apartment door and walked down to the parking garage where my 12-year-old Honda Civic waited. It wasn't much, but it was paid off, which was important since I was living on a fixed income from my teacher's pension and Social Security. Every dollar mattered now. The drive from Bellevue to Medina took 23 minutes at this hour, before traffic really picked up. I knew because I'd made this drive 487 times in the past 18 months. Yes, I'd counted. Not obsessively, just marking each day on my calendar, watching the weeks blur into months, wondering when this temporary help I'd promised to provide would transition into something with boundaries, with appreciation, with basic respect. My son Garrett's house appeared as I rounded the corner onto Evergreen Point Road. It was a beautiful home, a modern craftsman's style with floor-to-ceiling windows, perfectly manicured landscaping, and a 3-car garage. Worth at least $2.8 million in this market, or so Garrett had mentioned casually one evening, as if the number meant nothing. I pulled into the circular driveway, noting that both Garrett's Tesla and his wife Sienna's Range Rover were already there. Good. They hadn't left for work early without warning me, like had happened twice before, leaving me to find the house empty and the children still asleep upstairs. I used my key, given to me 18 months ago with the promise that I was part of the family and should come and go as I pleased, and let myself in through the side entrance that led to the mudroom. The house was quiet. Too quiet for a home with 2 young children. I set my purse down and walked toward the kitchen, my sensible sneakers silent on the heated hardwood floors that probably cost more per square foot than my entire monthly rent. That's when I heard voices. Low, but definitely arguing. Can't keep doing this, Garrett. She's your mother, you need to talk to her. Sienna's voice, tight with frustration. Talk to her about what? She's helping us with the kids. That's what we agreed. My son sounded tired, defensive. Helping? Garrett, she's here 14 hours a day, 6 days a week. This has gone way beyond helping. She's basically our live-in nanny, except she doesn't live in and we don't pay her. I froze in the hallway, my hand pressed against the wall to steady myself. She offered, Garrett said. She wanted to move here to be closer to the kids. Because we guilt her into it. We made it sound like the children would suffer without her, like we were desperate and she was our only option. And now she's given up her entire life in Sarasota, and we treat her like staff. We don't treat her like staff. Really? When's the last time you thanked her? When's the last time you asked about her life, her health, her feelings? When's the last time we paid her a single dollar for the thousands of hours of childcare she's provided? There was a long silence. I should have walked away, should have made noise to announce my presence, but I couldn't move. What do you want me to do? Garrett finally asked. I don't know. Something. Anything. Because right now, I feel like we're taking advantage of an elderly woman, and it makes me sick. Then why don't you talk to her? Garrett's voice had an edge now. You're the one who keeps asking her to stay late, to come in early, to handle extra stuff. If you feel so guilty, change your own behavior. You know what, Garrett? Forget it. Just forget I said anything. I heard footsteps approaching and quickly backtracked toward the mudroom, pretending I'd just arrived. By the time Sienna appeared in the kitchen, I was setting down my purse and pulling off my light jacket. Oh, Beatrice. Good morning. Sienna's face transformed instantly into a bright smile, but I could see the tightness around her eyes, the stress lines on her forehead. You're right on time, as always. Beatrice. That was my name. Beatrice Eleanor Thornwell, though everyone had called me Bea for most of my life. Except here, in this house, where I was always Beatrice or sometimes just Bea, said with less warmth, more like you'd address someone whose name you couldn't quite remember. Good morning, Sienna, I said, forcing my own smile. How are the children this morning? Still sleeping, I think. Callista had a bit of a rough night, bad dream or something. She came into our room around 2 and didn't settle back down until almost 4. Callista. My beautiful 6-year-old granddaughter with Garrett's dark hair and Sienna's striking green eyes. And Phoenix, her 4-year-old brother, who had his father's analytical mind and his mother's stubborn streak. Poor thing, I said. I'll make her favorite breakfast. Cinnamon French toast might cheer her up. Sienna glanced at her Apple Watch. That's sweet, but something quick might be better. I have an early meeting and Garrett needs to leave in 20 minutes. Maybe just cereal? I hid my disappointment. Callista loved my French toast. Of course. Whatever works best. Sienna moved past me toward the stairs, already scrolling through her phone. She was 34, tall and willowy, with the kind of effortless elegance that came from private school breeding and a trust fund safety net. She'd grown up in Bellevue's wealthiest enclave, attended Stanford for her undergrad and Wharton for her MBA, and now worked as a senior marketing executive for a major tech company. I'd tried to like her when Garrett first brought her home 9 years ago. I'd tried to see past the obvious differences in our backgrounds, our values, our entire worldviews. I'd told myself that love bridged gaps, that she made my son happy, that her ambitious drive would push him to achieve more. And she had made him achieve more. Garrett's career had skyrocketed after their marriage. He was now a vice president at a venture capital firm, making more money in a year than I'd made in my entire 40-year teaching career. They had this beautiful house, luxury cars, exotic vacations, and a lifestyle that seemed pulled from a magazine spread. But somewhere along the way, in building this perfect life, they'd forgotten that family wasn't just about what you could provide materially. It was about respect, gratitude, and recognizing sacrifice. I moved into the kitchen and started pulling out ingredients for a quick breakfast. The kitchen was a showpiece, custom Italian cabinets, marble countertops from Carrara, professional-grade appliances that cost more than my first car. I'd learned where everything was stored, learned Sienna's particular system of organization, learned not to rearrange anything even if it would be more efficient. This wasn't my kitchen. This wasn't my home. I was just passing through, 14 hours a day, 6 days a week. The sound of small feet on the stairs pulled me from my thoughts. Phoenix appeared first, his dinosaur pajamas wrinkled, his dark hair sticking up in every direction, his stuffed triceratops clutched under one arm. Grandma Bea. He ran toward me, and I scooped him up despite the protest in my lower back. At 73, lifting a 4-year-old was getting harder, but I'd never let him know that. Good morning, my sweet boy. Did you sleep well? He nodded against my shoulder, still half asleep. I dreamed about dinosaurs. There was a T-Rex and he was really big and he was chasing the plant eaters, but then I helped them hide. You're very brave, I said, kissing the top of his head. Now, what would you like for breakfast? Pancakes with chocolate chips. Phoenix, sweetheart, Grandma's going to make cereal this morning. But tomorrow, I promise we'll have pancakes. A promise I might not be able to keep if Sienna decided tomorrow also required something quick and easy. Callista appeared next, moving slower, her eyes red-rimmed and puffy. She climbed onto one of the kitchen counter stools without a word, her beloved stuffed rabbit clutched to her chest. "Bad night, sweetie?" I asked gently. She nodded. "I had a scary dream. There were monsters in my closet and they wanted to eat my toys." I moved around the counter and wrapped my arms around her. She was getting so big, so grown up. Soon she wouldn't want these morning hugs anymore, and the thought made my heart ache. "Well, monsters can't hurt you because you're way too strong and brave. And besides, Grandma B is here, and I don't let any monsters bother my grandchildren." A small smile. "Promise?" "Promise." Garrett appeared in the kitchen doorway, already dressed in an expensive suit, his phone pressed to his ear. He gave me a quick nod of acknowledgement and mouthed, "Thank you," before disappearing back toward his home office, deep in conversation about quarterly projections and market positioning. I poured cereal for the children, organic, gluten-free options that cost $8 a box, and added almond milk. Sienna had very particular ideas about nutrition, which I respected even if I privately thought a little regular milk wouldn't hurt anyone. "Grandma, can you read to us after breakfast?" Callista asked between bites. "Of course, sweetheart. We have a little time before school. Which book would you like?" "The one about the girl who goes to the moon." Phoenix shook his head vigorously. "No. The Dinosaur Encyclopedia. How about we read 2 books? One of each?" They both smiled, and in that moment, all the exhaustion, all the lack of appreciation, all the casual dismissiveness, it all felt worth it. These children loved me. They needed me. That had to count for something. Sienna reappeared, now dressed in a charcoal gray pantsuit that probably cost what I spent on groceries for 3 months. She grabbed a green smoothie from the refrigerator, pre-made by their meal prep service, and checked her watch again. "Beatrice, can you make sure Callista's homework folder is in her backpack? She has that math worksheet that needs to be turned in today." "Already done. I checked it last night before I left." "Great. Also, Phoenix has soccer practice at 4 today instead of 5. Can you handle the schedule change?" My mind raced. 4 o'clock meant I'd barely have time to get him from school, change his clothes, and drive to the fields on the other side of Bellevue. And I'd planned to use that hour to go to the pharmacy for my blood pressure medication. "Yes, I can handle it," I said. "Perfect. Oh, and we're having some colleagues over for dinner Friday night. Nothing major, just 6 people, but could you prepare something nice? Maybe that Mediterranean chicken you made last time?" Everyone raved about it. Friday. My one day off. My single day each week where I could sleep past 6 a.m., where I could do my own grocery shopping, where I could exist as something other than their unpaid domestic worker. Friday is usually my. I know it's your day off, but this dinner is really important for Garrett's career. These are potential investors. We need everything to be perfect. Sienna's smile didn't reach her eyes. "I'll pay you back, I promise. Maybe you can take next Friday off instead?" We both knew that would never happen. There was always something next Friday. Always a reason why I couldn't be spared. "Of course," I heard myself say. "I'm happy to help." The words tasted like ash in my mouth. Sienna leaned down to kiss both children goodbye, careful not to smudge her lipstick, grabbed her designer bag, and headed for the garage. "Thanks, Beatrice. You're a lifesaver." And then she was gone, and it was just me and the children and the enormous house that never quite felt warm despite all its expensive heating systems. I helped Callista and Phoenix finish breakfast, then supervised teeth brushing and shoe tying and backpack checking. We read 2 books as promised, even though we were running a few minutes behind. Some things were more important than punctuality. The school drop-off line was its own special kind of torture. I sat in my aging Honda Civic, surrounded by Teslas and BMWs and Mercedes SUVs, watching other mothers, younger mothers, chatting with each other, making playdate plans, discussing their yoga classes and book clubs and wine nights. I used to have those things. In Sarasota, I'd had a whole life. My best friend Margaret and I had walked on the beach every morning at 7. I'd volunteered at the local library's literacy program. I'd taken a watercolor painting class on Thursday evenings. I'd had doctor's appointments scheduled at convenient times, hair appointments every 6 weeks, a dentist who knew my name. Now I had this. A borrowed life. A borrowed purpose. Borrowed grandchildren who I loved with my whole heart but who came with conditions attached. Bye, Grandma B. Callista called out as she and Phoenix climbed out of the car. See you after school. Have a wonderful day, both of you. Be kind and be brave. They waved and ran toward the school entrance, their backpacks bouncing. I watched until they disappeared inside, then pulled out of the drop-off line and headed back to the house. The real work began once the children were at school. Cleaning up from breakfast, starting laundry, emptying the dishwasher that Sienna had loaded incorrectly again, wiping down counters, vacuuming the playroom, tidying the children's bedrooms. Their house had 5 bedrooms and 4 bathrooms spread across 4,200 square feet. It took me nearly 3 hours to properly maintain everything, even on days when the children hadn't made huge messes. Around 11, I started preparing ingredients for dinner. Sienna had texted, she always texted, never called, with a casual reminder that Garrett had a gluten intolerance he was exploring, despite having eaten bread his entire life without issue, and could I please make sure dinner accommodated that? So I scrapped my plan for regular pasta and went shopping for gluten-free alternatives that cost 3 times as much and tasted like cardboard. I used my own money, of course. Sienna would reimburse me eventually, probably. Maybe. If I reminded her enough times. The afternoon pickup at school arrived too quickly. I loaded Callista and Phoenix back into my car, listening to their chatter about their day. Callista had scored highest on her spelling test, Phoenix had painted a picture of our family, including me, which made my heart swell, and then we were off to Phoenix's soccer practice. The soccer fields were crowded with other parents, most of them younger, fitter, dressed in expensive athleisure wear. They stood in clusters, talking and laughing while their children ran drills. I found a spot on the bleachers, my knees protesting as I climbed up 3 rows. For the next hour, I watched Phoenix chase the ball with his teammates, occasionally glancing at my phone to check the time. By the time practice ended and we got back to the house, it was after 5. I still needed to finish preparing dinner, help Callista with her homework, and give Phoenix his bath. Garrett had texted saying he'd be home late, a work dinner that ran long. Sienna hadn't responded to my question about when she'd be home. It was past 8 when Sienna finally walked through the door, looking exhausted and irritated. Sorry I'm late. The meeting ran over and then there was an accident on 520. She barely glanced at me as she kicked off her heels. Are the kids in bed? Yes. Both bathed and asleep. Did Callista do her homework? All finished. Her math worksheet is in her folder. Great. Sienna walked toward the stairs, then paused. Oh, Beatrice? Tomorrow I need you here by 6 instead of 6:30. I have an early flight to San Francisco. 6 a.m. That meant I'd need to leave my apartment by 5:30. That meant even less sleep than usual. Of course, I said automatically. Thanks. You're a gem. There's leftover chicken in the fridge if you want some. Leftover chicken. The same chicken I'd cooked for their dinner. Being offered back to me like I was a guest who might appreciate the hospitality. I didn't take the chicken. I gathered my things, said goodbye to no one since Sienna had already disappeared upstairs, and drove back to my small apartment in Bellevue. It was nearly 9 p.m. when I finally walked through my own door. My back ached, my feet hurt, and I still needed to prepare something for my own dinner since I'd been too busy feeding everyone else to eat properly. I heated up a can of soup, the cheap kind, because my budget didn't allow for organic or artisanal or whatever trendy thing Sienna was buying that week, and sat at my small kitchen table, staring at the walls of my apartment. 800 square feet. 1 bedroom, 1 bathroom. Furniture mostly from IKEA because I'd sold my nice pieces when I downsized from my Florida condo. No view except the parking lot. No warmth, no personality. It was just a place to sleep between 14-hour shifts at my son's house. This wasn't what my retirement was supposed to look like. I'd taught second grade for 40 years. 40 years of early mornings and parent-teacher conferences and grading papers late into the night. I'd shaped young minds, taught children to read and think and dream. I'd made a difference in hundreds of lives. And when I'd retired at 70, I'd imagined a different kind of life. Travel maybe. More time for my hobbies. Leisurely mornings with coffee and books. Volunteering at the pace I chose, not at the pace demanded by someone else's schedule. Instead, I'd gotten a phone call from Garrett 18 months ago. "Mom, we need your help." His voice had been strained, stressed. "Sienna's career is really taking off, and my job is demanding more travel. Daycare is so expensive here, we're talking $3,000 a month per kid. And we don't trust just anyone with Callista and Phoenix. They need family. They need their grandmother." And I'd said yes. Because that's what mothers do. We say yes even when it costs us everything. We sacrifice because we're told that's what love looks like. But was this love? Or was this exploitation dressed up in the language of family obligation? I finished my soup and looked at the calendar on my refrigerator. Tomorrow was Wednesday. Then Thursday. Then Friday, when I'd be cooking for Sienna's dinner party on my supposed day off. Then the weekend, when I'd be needed both days because Garrett and Sienna had plans. When did I get a day off? When did I get to exist as Beatrice Eleanor Thornwell, retired teacher and human being with her own needs and desires, rather than just Grandma B, the convenient unpaid labor force? My phone buzzed. A text from Sienna. "By the way, forgot to mention, can you pick up my dry cleaning tomorrow? The ticket is on the kitchen counter. Thanks." Not a request. A command. Thanks added as an afterthought, as if that made it better. I stared at the text for a long time before responding with a simple, "Okay." What else could I say? No. That wasn't an option. I'd moved my entire life here to help them. I'd given up my retirement, my friends, my autonomy. Saying no now would mean admitting that all those sacrifices had been for nothing, that I'd made a terrible mistake. So I'd continue saying yes. Continue showing up at 6 a.m. or 6:30 a.m. or whenever they needed me. Continue cooking their meals and washing their laundry and raising their children while they built their successful careers and impressive lives. And I'd continue going home alone each night to my small apartment, wondering when exactly I'd stopped being a person and become just a function. Just a role to fill. Just a babysitter. I didn't know it yet, but everything was about to change. The casual cruelty I'd endured for 18 months was about to escalate into something that would force me to make an impossible choice. And the discovery I was about to make would reveal that my daughter-in-law wasn't just thoughtless and ungrateful. She was dangerous. But that revelation was still days away. For now, I set my alarm for 5:15 a.m., took my blood pressure medication with a glass of water, and climbed into bed, too exhausted to even read the book on my nightstand. Tomorrow would be another day of giving everything I had to people who barely noticed I existed. And I would smile through every moment of it, because that's what grandmothers do. The wake-up call came at 5:15 a.m., just as it had every day for the past 18 months. But this particular Thursday morning in late October felt different somehow. Heavier. Like the air itself was pressing down on my chest as I forced myself out of bed. I'd dreamed about Sarasota again. In the dream, I was walking on the beach with Margaret, my best friend from my old life. We were laughing about something, our bare feet in the warm sand, the Gulf of Mexico stretching endlessly before us. The sun was warm on my face, and I felt light, unburdened, free. Then my alarm had shattered the illusion, pulling me back to reality. Back to my small apartment in Bellevue. Back to another day of being useful rather than valued. I went through my morning routine on autopilot: shower, dress in comfortable clothes suitable for chasing children, gulp down instant coffee that never quite woke me up the way it used to. My phone showed no messages, which meant Sienna hadn't changed the schedule overnight. Small mercies. The drive to Medina was quiet at this hour, just me and a handful of other early commuters on the road. I found myself wondering about them. Were they heading to jobs they loved? Were they driving toward families that appreciated them? Or were they, like me, moving through life on rails they hadn't chosen, too far down the track to turn back? I used my key to let myself into Garrett and Sienna's house at exactly 6:28 a.m. The lights were already on in the kitchen, and I could hear movement upstairs. At least they were awake this time. Sienna appeared at the top of the stairs as I was hanging up my jacket. She was dressed in a navy suit with her hair pulled back in a severe bun, her phone already pressed to her ear. "No, I specifically said the presentation needed to be ready by Wednesday," she was saying, her voice sharp with irritation. "I don't care what the design team's timeline is. Make it happen." She ended the call and looked down at me from the landing. "Oh good, Beatrice. You're here. I need to leave in 10 minutes. Can you handle the kids' breakfast? Garrett's on a call with London and can't be disturbed." "Of course," I said. "What would you like me to make?" "Whatever's quick. I don't have time for the morning routine today." She disappeared back into the master bedroom. "Whatever's quick. Not whatever the children would enjoy or something nutritious. Just quick. Because their time was valuable, and mine was not." I made my way to the kitchen and started pulling out ingredients for oatmeal. Callista and Phoenix both loved oatmeal with brown sugar and sliced bananas. It was warm and comforting and took less than 10 minutes to prepare. Callista appeared first, moving slowly, still in her pajamas. "Morning, Grandma B," she said, climbing onto her usual stool at the kitchen island. "Good morning, sweetheart. How did you sleep?" She shrugged. "Okay, I guess. Mom and Dad were fighting again last night. I could hear them through the wall." My hands stilled on the pot I was stirring. "Fighting about what, honey?" "I don't know. Something about money and trips and Mom being mad at Dad for something." She picked at a loose thread on her pajama sleeve. "They fight a lot now." I wanted to probe further, to understand what was happening in this house beyond the surface of expensive possessions and successful careers. But I also knew better than to put Callista in the position of reporting on her parents. "All couples disagree sometimes," I said gently. "I'm sure everything is fine." Phoenix bounded into the kitchen next, full of energy despite the early hour. "Grandma B. Can we go to the park today after school? Please?" "We'll see, sweetheart. We have to check with your mom about the schedule first." "Mom always says no," Phoenix said matter-of-factly. "She says the park is dirty and there are too many germs." I served them both bowls of oatmeal, adding extra brown sugar to Phoenix's because he liked it sweet. They ate quietly while I packed their lunches: turkey sandwiches on whole grain bread, apple slices, carrot sticks, and the organic cookies that Sienna approved of. Garrett rushed through the kitchen without stopping, his phone still pressed to his ear. He grabbed a protein bar from the pantry and was gone again, not even acknowledging his children. Sienna reappeared, now with a full face of makeup and her designer bag over her shoulder. "Kids, finish up. Beatrice, they both need to be at school by 7:45 today. Callista has early choir practice and Phoenix has a playdate at 3:30 with the Ashford boy. Make sure he's there on time, the mother is very particular." "Wait," I said, my mind racing. "Phoenix has soccer at 4 today. How can he do both?" Sienna waved a hand dismissively. "Cancel soccer. The playdate is more important. The Ashfords are connected to the board at Seattle Academy, and we're hoping to get Phoenix in for kindergarten next year. But Phoenix loves soccer. He's been looking forward to practice all week." "Beatrice." Sienna's voice took on that edge I'd learned to recognize. The one that said the discussion was over. The playdate is non-negotiable. Soccer is just recreation. This is about his future. Phoenix had stopped eating and was staring at his bowl, his small shoulders hunched. He'd heard every word. Can I at least explain to him why? I don't have time for this conversation. Handle it however you want, just make sure he's at the Ashfords by 3:30. Sienna kissed the tops of both children's heads, perfunctory, rushed, and headed for the garage. I'll be home late again. There's money on the counter for pizza if you don't want to cook. And then she was gone, and I was left with 2 children and a schedule that prioritized networking over a 4-year-old's happiness. I looked at Phoenix, whose eyes had filled with tears he was trying desperately not to shed. I wanted to play soccer, he whispered. My heart shattered. I know, sweetheart. I know. The morning routine continued, teeth brushing, getting dressed, backpack checking. Callisto was unusually quiet, picking up on the tension. Phoenix moved through everything mechanically, the joy drained from his normally exuberant personality. As I drove them to school, I found myself getting angry. Not the quiet, swallowed down frustration I'd been carrying for months, but real, burning anger. Phoenix was 4 years old. 4. His childhood should be about play and discovery and joy, not about strategic networking for a kindergarten placement at an elite private school. He should be allowed to play soccer if he loved soccer, not shuffled around like a chess piece in his parents' social climbing game. After drop-off, I sat in the school parking lot for a long time, my hands gripping the steering wheel. What was I doing? What was I enabling by going along with all of this? I'd told myself I was helping. I'd convinced myself that my presence in these children's lives was providing them with stability, with love, with at least one adult who put their emotional needs first. But was that true? Or was I just making it easier for Garrett and Sienna to ignore their children? Was I providing cover for parenting that prioritized status and success over actual human connection? My phone buzzed. A text from Sienna. Also need you to run to Nordstrom and pick up the dress I have on hold. I need it for tomorrow night's gala. The alterations should be done. Receipt is in the kitchen drawer. I stared at the message. Not a request. Not even a please or if you have time. Just an assumption that I would drop everything to handle her personal errands. I typed back, I have a doctor's appointment this afternoon at 2 o'clock. I can pick it up after if I have time. The response came within seconds, reschedule the doctor. The dress needs to be picked up today, they close at 6 and I won't be able to get there. My doctor's appointment. The one I'd already rescheduled twice because of Sienna's changing demands. The one to follow up on my blood pressure, which had been creeping higher over the past few months. The one I actually needed. I sat there in my car, staring at those words. Reschedule the doctor. As if my health was less important than her dress. As if my time was infinitely flexible and endlessly available. As if I existed solely to make her life easier. Something inside me cracked. I didn't respond to the text. Instead, I drove back to the house in Medina, my hands shaking slightly on the wheel. The house was empty and quiet. I stood in the massive kitchen with its expensive appliances and marble countertops, and I looked at the list Sienna had left on the counter. The list of tasks she expected me to complete today. Asterisk dry cleaning pickup. Nordstrom dress pickup. Grocery shopping, list attached. Kids' bathroom deep clean. Organize playroom. Call landscaper about fall cleanup. Pick up Callista's prescription. Prep dinner, salmon, roasted vegetables. Phoenix dentist appointment rescheduling. Return Amazon packages asterisk. 10 items. 10 separate errands and tasks, on top of the 6 hours of childcare. None of them asked as favors. All of them assumed as obligations. At the bottom, in Sienna's neat handwriting, thanks B, you're the best. The casual dismissiveness of it, reducing hours of unpaid labor to a cheerful, you're the best, made me want to scream. I walked slowly through the house, really looking at it for the first time in months. The photos on the walls showed Garrett and Sienna at various exotic locations: Thailand, Italy, Morocco. The children appeared in some of them, but not all. And I wasn't in any of them, despite being the person who made all these trips possible by staying behind to manage their lives. In Garrett's home office, his desk was covered with papers. I wasn't snooping, I was looking for the landscaper's phone number that Sienna had mentioned might be on his desk. That's when I saw the folder. It was labeled Westbrook Academy, Phoenix Application. I picked it up, curious about this kindergarten that was apparently worth canceling my grandson's beloved soccer practice. Inside were brochures, application forms, and financial documents. My eyes caught on one particular page, a letter from the school's admissions office. Thank you for your continued interest in Westbrook Academy. As discussed, the enrollment fee of $45,000 secures Phoenix's placement in our kindergarten program, with annual tuition of $38,000 thereafter. I sat down hard in Garrett's expensive desk chair, the folder still in my hands. $45,000. Just to enroll. Then $38,000 every year after that. For kindergarten. My hands were shaking as I continued reading. There were more documents, financial statements, investment accounts, a letter from their accountant discussing optimal strategies for educational expense management. And then I saw something that made my blood run cold. A spreadsheet. Clearly created by Sienna based on the file name. It was titled Childcare Cost Analysis. I shouldn't have opened it. I knew I shouldn't have. But my finger clicked on the file before my conscience could stop me. The spreadsheet laid out various childcare options with associated costs. Full-time nanny, $65,000 per year plus benefits equals $80,000. Au pair program, $25,000 per year plus room/board equals $35,000. Premium daycare, both kids $72,000 per year family member, current $0. Below that, a notes section in Sienna's clinical language. Current arrangement with B is optimal from cost perspective. Saves approximately $75,000 annually. However, long-term sustainability questionable. B is 73 and showing signs of fatigue. May need transition plan within 6 to 12 months. Recommend beginning search for replacement care solution by Q2 next year. B. Not even my full name. Just an initial. Like I was a budget line item, not a human being. Not their children's grandmother. I sat there staring at that screen, feeling something fundamental shift inside me. They'd calculated it. They'd actually sat down and calculated how much money they were saving by using me. $75,000 a year. Money they were now planning to spend on a kindergarten placement for Phoenix while paying me nothing. Current arrangement with B is optimal from cost perspective. I wasn't family. I wasn't even really Beatrice. I was B, the free childcare option that was optimal until I became too old or too tired to be useful anymore. Showing signs of fatigue. Of course I was showing signs of fatigue. I was 73 years old, working 14-hour days, 6 days a week, with no compensation and no appreciation. I'd given up my retirement, my home, my entire life to help them, and they'd reduced me to a line item in a cost analysis. May need transition plan within 6 to 12 months. A transition plan. Like I was a piece of equipment that was nearing the end of its useful life. Not a person who deserved a conversation about expectations. Not a mother who deserved honesty from her son. Just a resource that would eventually need to be replaced. I closed the laptop and stood up, my legs unsteady. The house suddenly felt suffocating, all this expensive space, all these material possessions, all this wealth built on the backs of people they considered beneath them. My phone rang. Sienna. I almost didn't answer. But habit and 18 months of conditioning made me press the green button. Beatrice, did you see my text about the dress? Her voice was impatient, slightly annoyed that I hadn't responded immediately. I saw it, I said, surprised by how calm my voice sounded. I can't pick it up today. I have a doctor's appointment. I already told you to reschedule that. The dress is time sensitive. And my health isn't? There was a pause. Excuse me? I said, my health isn't time sensitive. My blood pressure appointment that I've already rescheduled twice isn't important enough to prioritize over your dress? Beatrice, I don't appreciate your tone. I'm simply asking you to. You're not asking, Sienna. You're demanding. There's a difference. Another pause, longer this time. When she spoke again, her voice had hardened. I think you're forgetting your place here. My place. As if I were a servant. As if being a grandmother, being family, didn't give me the right to basic respect. What exactly is my place, Sienna? You're here to help with the children. That's what you agreed to when you moved here. I agreed to help with childcare. I didn't agree to be your unpaid personal assistant and housekeeper. I didn't agree to work 14 hours a day with no compensation. I didn't agree to give up my entire life while you calculate how much money you're saving by using me. Silence. Heavy, shocked silence. What are you talking about? I saw the spreadsheet, Sienna. Current arrangement with B is optimal from cost perspective. That's how you think of me? As a cost-saving measure? You went through Garrett's office? You looked at our private files? Her voice was rising now, indignant. That's a complete violation of. Of what? Of your privacy? What about my dignity? What about treating me like a human being instead of free labor? We don't treat you like free labor. We treat you like family. Family doesn't calculate the money they're saving by exploiting their relatives. Family doesn't make spreadsheets about transition plans for replacing their elderly mother. How dare you? Sienna's voice was shaking with rage now. After everything we've done for you. We let you move here, we gave you access to the children, we made you part of our lives. You let me? You made me part of your lives? I was shaking now too, but with anger rather than fear. Sienna, I gave up everything to help you. I sold my home. I left my friends, my community, my entire retirement life. And you act like you did me a favor? You wanted to be near your grandchildren. Because you guilt me into it. You made it sound like the children would suffer without me, like you were desperate and I was the only solution. And I believed you. I believed you actually needed me. We do need you. No, you need free childcare. You need someone to cook your meals and do your laundry and run your errands so you can focus on your precious careers and your social climbing. You need $75,000 worth of services without having to pay for them. If you're so unhappy with the arrangement, then maybe we need to discuss. Discuss what? Your transition plan? Whether I'm still useful enough to keep around, or if you should start interviewing my replacement. Beatrice, you're being completely unreasonable. If you can't handle the responsibilities anymore, just say so. We can make other arrangements. The casual cruelty of it, the suggestion that I was the problem, that I was failing in my responsibilities rather than being exploited, made something in me snap completely. You're right, I said, my voice suddenly very quiet. We do need to make other arrangements. What does that mean? It means I quit. The words hung in the air between us. I could hear Sienna breathing on the other end of the line, processing what I just said. You quit? She sounded genuinely shocked. Beatrice, you can't just quit. You're their grandmother. Exactly. I'm their grandmother. Not their nanny. Not their maid. Not a line item in your budget spreadsheet. I'm done being useful at the expense of being valued. You're being dramatic. Look, if this is about compensation, we can discuss. This isn't about money, Sienna. This is about respect. About being treated like a human being. About not having every boundary I try to set trampled because it's inconvenient for you. So what, you're just going to abandon the children? Walk away from your own grandchildren because your feelings are hurt? The manipulation was so blatant it would have been funny if it weren't so painful. I'm not abandoning anyone. I'm setting boundaries. I'm reclaiming my life. You and Garrett are the children's parents. It's time you started acting like it. Beatrice, if you're not here this afternoon, I don't know what we're going to do. Garrett and I both have commitments. We're counting on you. Then I suggest you start making phone calls. Check out those other options on your spreadsheet. The nanny services, the au pair programs, the premium daycares. You know, all the options normal people use when they need childcare. This is ridiculous. You're really going to do this? Today? With no notice? You were planning to replace me within 6 to 12 months anyway. I'm just accelerating your timeline. I could hear her trying to control her temper, could practically see her in my mind's eye, standing in whatever office or parking lot she was in, her face flushed with anger and frustration. Fine, she said finally, her voice ice cold. If that's how you want to play this. But don't expect to have a relationship with Callista and Phoenix after this. You're choosing to walk away from them. The threat was clear. If I didn't continue to serve them on their terms, I'd lose access to my grandchildren entirely. And maybe, 18 months ago, even 18 hours ago, that threat would have worked. The fear of losing Callista and Phoenix would have been enough to make me back down, to apologize, to accept whatever terms they demanded. But I'd seen the spreadsheet. I'd read those clinical notes about replacing me. I'd spent 18 months sacrificing everything while being treated as nothing more than a convenient cost-saving measure. Sienna, I said quietly, you're going to use my grandchildren as leverage? You're going to threaten to keep them from me if I don't continue working for free? I'm not threatening anything. I'm simply pointing out the natural consequences of your choice. The natural consequences. Right. I felt strangely calm now, like I'd moved through anger into something clearer and colder. Well, here are some natural consequences for you to consider. I'm not picking up the kids today. I'm not making dinner tonight. I'm not running your errands or cleaning your house or organizing your life. Beatrice. I'm sending you a bill. For the past 18 months of childcare. $75,000 a year, according to your own calculations. That's $112,500 for the time I've already worked. You can't be serious. I'm completely serious. You calculated the value of my services. Now you can pay for them. We'll never pay that. You offered to help voluntarily. Under false pretenses. You made me believe you needed help, not free labor. You exploited my love for my grandchildren and my desire to be a good mother and grandmother. That's called fraud, Sienna. You're insane. Garrett needs to know about this. Please do tell Garrett. Tell him his mother found the spreadsheet where you reduced her to a cost-benefit analysis. Tell him I'm done being the optimal arrangement from a cost perspective. Tell him whatever you want. I hung up before she could respond. My hands were shaking so badly I had to set the phone down on the kitchen counter. What had I just done? I'd quit. I'd actually quit. After 18 months of swallowing my pride, accepting disrespect, and sacrificing my own needs, I'd finally reached my breaking point. And now I had approximately 5 hours before school pickup, before Garrett and Sienna would realize I'd meant what I said, before this entire situation exploded in ways I couldn't fully predict. I looked at the time. 10:47 a.m. I picked up my purse, walked out of that house for the last time as their unpaid help, and drove back to my apartment in Bellevue. It was time to figure out what came next. And it was time to stop being useful at the expense of being valued. But what I didn't know yet was that quitting was just the beginning. The real confrontation was still ahead. And what I was about to discover about Sienna would make her financial exploitation seem almost merciful by comparison. I sat in my small apartment for exactly 12 minutes after hanging up on Sienna, my heart pounding so hard I could feel it in my throat. Then my phone started ringing. Garrett. I let it ring through to voicemail. It rang again immediately. And again. On the fourth call, I turned the phone completely off and set it face down on my kitchen table. I needed to think. I needed to figure out what I'd just done and what it meant for my relationship with my grandchildren. Because despite everything, despite the exploitation and the spreadsheets and the casual cruelty, I loved Callista and Phoenix with my whole heart. But I also knew that continuing to enable Garrett and Sienna's behavior wasn't helping those children. It was teaching them that using people was acceptable. That family could be treated as a resource to be exploited and discarded when no longer useful. I made myself a cup of tea, real tea, not the expensive organic blend that Sienna preferred, and sat down to think about my next move. The school would dismiss at 3:15 p.m. That gave me approximately 4 hours before Garrett and Sienna realized I wasn't coming. 4 hours before they'd have to scramble to figure out who would pick up their children. Part of me felt guilty. Those babies didn't deserve to be caught in the middle of this. But another part of me, the part that had been systematically diminished over 18 months, knew that this was necessary. Garrett and Sienna needed to understand that I was a person with boundaries, not an infinitely available resource. I pulled out my laptop and did something I hadn't done in weeks. I checked my email. My real email, not the one I used for coordinating the children's schedules. There were messages from Margaret in Sarasota, asking how I was doing, saying she missed our morning walks. There was a newsletter from my old book club, discussing their latest selection. There was an invitation to a retirement community social event that I'd never responded to because I was always too exhausted to even consider attending. I had a life before I became the optimal cost-saving arrangement. I'd had friends and hobbies and autonomy. And I could have those things again. But first, I needed to understand the full scope of what I was dealing with. I opened a new browser window and typed in Eldercare Financial Exploitation, Washington State. If Garrett and Sienna could calculate the value of my unpaid labor, I could calculate what legal protections I might have. What I found was both enlightening and disturbing. Washington State had specific laws about elder financial abuse, including provisions for family members who exploited elderly relatives by coercing them into providing unpaid services under false pretenses. I wasn't sure if my situation qualified legally, but morally, there was no question. I'd been manipulated into giving up my retirement to provide services that saved them $75,000 a year while receiving nothing in return, not even basic respect. I was deep into reading about small claims court limitations when my doorbell rang. My first instinct was to ignore it. It was only 12:30 p.m., too early for Garrett and Sienna to have left work and driven here. But the doorbell rang again, followed by insistent knocking. "Mom. I know you're in there. Open the door." Garrett's voice, tight with frustration and barely contained anger. I took a deep breath and opened the door. My son stood there in his expensive suit, his tie loosened, his face flushed. Behind him in the parking lot, I could see his Tesla, parked haphazardly across 2 spaces. "What the hell is going on?" he demanded, pushing past me into my small apartment. "Sienna called me in hysterics saying you quit? That you hung up on her and turned off your phone?" I closed the door quietly and turned to face him. I did quit. And I turned off my phone because I needed time to think without being harassed. Harassed? "Mom, you can't just quit taking care of your grandchildren. We need you." "No, Garrett. You need childcare. There's a difference." He ran a hand through his hair, a gesture I recognized from his childhood when he was frustrated and trying to control his temper. "This is insane. What brought this on? Did something happen? What brought this on?" I felt my own anger rising again. "Garrett, when was the last time you thanked me? When was the last time you asked how I was doing? When was the last time you treated me like your mother instead of like hired help you don't bother paying? That's not fair. We appreciate everything you do. Do you? Because Sienna's spreadsheet suggests otherwise." His face went pale. "What spreadsheet?" "The one where she calculated that I'm saving you $75,000 a year. The one where she referred to me as B and noted that the current arrangement is optimal from a cost perspective. The one where she discussed needing a transition plan to replace me within 6 to 12 months. Garrett sank down onto my small couch, his face in his hands. You weren't supposed to see that. No, I wasn't. I was supposed to continue working myself to exhaustion while you and Sienna calculated the monetary value of exploiting your own mother. It's not like that. Then what is it like, Garrett? Explain it to me. Because from where I'm standing, you and your wife have been using me. You convinced me to give up my retirement, my home, my entire life to help you, and then you reduced me to a budget line item. He looked up at me, and for a moment I saw something in his eyes, shame, maybe, or recognition of the truth in my words. But then his expression hardened. You agreed to help us. Nobody forced you. You manipulated me. You made it sound like your children would suffer without me, like you were desperate. And I believed you because you're my son and I wanted to help you succeed. And you did help us. The kids love you, we've been able to focus on our careers. While paying me nothing. While demanding more and more of my time. While treating every boundary I tried to set as an inconvenience to be bulldozed over. If you wanted compensation, you should have said something. I shouldn't have to beg my own son to treat me with basic dignity, Garrett. That should be a given. He stood up abruptly, pacing my small living room like a caged animal. So what, you're just done? You're going to walk away from Callista and Phoenix because you're mad at us? I'm not walking away from them. I'm refusing to continue being exploited. There's a difference. The kids need to be picked up from school in 3 hours, Mom. What are we supposed to do? What every other working parent does. Figure it out. Call a babysitting service. Check into those daycare options Sienna researched. Or, here's a radical idea, one of you could leave work early and pick up your own children. We both have important meetings this afternoon. And I had a doctor's appointment that Sienna told me to cancel so I could pick up her dress. Your meetings aren't more important than my health, Garrett. He stopped pacing and looked at me with something like desperation. Mom, please. Just today. Give us time to make other arrangements. No. The word hung between us, small but absolute. What do you mean, no? I mean no, Garrett. I'm not available today. I'm not available tomorrow. I'm done being the solution to every childcare problem you have while being treated like I'm invisible. His desperation shifted to anger. You're being selfish. You're punishing the kids because you're having some kind of crisis. I'm not having a crisis. I'm having a reckoning. With myself, with you, and with the situation I've allowed to develop because I was afraid of losing access to my grandchildren. And you think this is how you maintain that access? By abandoning them? I think that if my relationship with Callista and Phoenix is contingent on me providing free labor while being disrespected, then it's not really a relationship. It's exploitation with hostages. Garrett's phone buzzed. He glanced at it, and his face tightened. Sienna's on her way here. You can explain this to both of us. I don't need to explain anything to Sienna. I already told her I quit. Mom, please. His voice softened slightly. The kids love you. They need you. They need parents who are present. Parents who prioritize their well-being over social climbing and career advancement. Parents who don't calculate the cost-benefit of their own mother. That spreadsheet was it was financial planning. We have to budget, to think about expenses. Do you have a spreadsheet for Sienna's parents? Are you calculating how much money you save by them not being involved? Or is it just me who gets reduced to a cost analysis? He didn't answer, which was answer enough. Sienna's Range Rover pulled into the parking lot 15 minutes later. I watched from my window as she got out, her face set in hard lines, and marched toward my building. She didn't bother knocking. Garrett must have left the door unlocked. She just walked right in like she owned the place. Beatrice. Her voice was cold, controlled. We need to talk about this situation rationally. There's nothing irrational about refusing to be exploited, I said. Exploited? That's a very strong word for a grandmother spending time with her grandchildren. Is that what you call 14-hour days, 6 days a week, with no compensation? Spending time. Your family. Family helps each other. Family respects each other. Family doesn't make spreadsheets calculating the monetary value of using their elderly relatives. Sienna's jaw tightened. You went through our private files. I was looking for the landscaper's phone number. Your spreadsheet was open on Garrett's laptop. Regardless, that was private financial planning. It had nothing to do with you. It had everything to do with me. I was the subject of your cost-benefit analysis. We were simply evaluating our options. By putting a dollar value on your mother-in-law and planning to replace her when she became inconveniently old? Sienna glanced at Garrett, something passing between them. Then she turned back to me, her expression shifting to something that might have been conciliatory if her eyes weren't so calculating. Look, Beatrice. If this is about wanting recognition for your contributions, we can discuss that. Maybe we've taken you for granted. We can work on being more appreciative. This isn't about appreciation. This is about basic human dignity. Fine. Dignity. We can respect that. But right now, we have a practical problem. The children need to be picked up in less than 3 hours, and both Garrett and I have commitments we can't break. Can we table this discussion until after you handle pickup? No. Sienna's mask of conciliation cracked. No? Just like that? You're really going to let your grandchildren stand at school wondering where everyone is? The school has my son's phone number and yours. They'll call you. And then you'll have to be parents and figure it out. We can't just leave work on a moment's notice. Then I suggest you call one of those emergency babysitting services. Or maybe the Ashfords can pick up Phoenix along with their son since his playdate is apparently so important it was worth canceling the soccer he loves. Garrett stepped forward. Mom, you're being unreasonable. Am I? Or am I finally being reasonable after 18 months of being treated unreasonably? What do you want? Sienna asked bluntly. Money? Fine. We'll pay you going forward. Name your rate. I don't want your money, Sienna. I want to not be your employee. I want to be the children's grandmother, on terms that don't require me to sacrifice my entire existence. That's not realistic. Childcare requires commitment. From parents. Childcare requires commitment from parents. I can be a grandmother, a loving, involved grandmother, without being your full-time unpaid nanny. So what are you proposing? Garrett asked. You'll see them once a week for a few hours? That's all we get? What you get is what every other parent gets when they don't exploit their relatives. You get to raise your own children while I'm available for the things grandmothers should do, special occasions, occasional babysitting when it's mutually convenient, and building a relationship based on love instead of obligation. Sienna laughed, but there was no humor in it. That's not going to work for us. Then you'll need to find alternative childcare. And you're fine with basically abandoning your relationship with Callista and Phoenix? I'm not abandoning anyone. You're the ones making that choice by insisting the only way I can be in their lives is if I'm working for free. Sienna's phone rang. She glanced at it and her expression changed. It's the school. It's only 1:45, why would they be calling? She answered, listened, and her face went white. What? When? Is he okay? My heart jumped into my throat. What's wrong? Sienna was already moving toward the door. Phoenix fell on the playground. They think his arm might be broken. They've called an ambulance. Everything else, the argument, the exploitation, the anger, evaporated instantly. Which hospital? Seattle Children's. Sienna was out the door, Garrett right behind her. I grabbed my purse and keys and followed them to the parking lot. I'm coming with you. Beatrice, we can handle, Sienna started. He's my grandson. I'm coming. We took separate cars, me following their Range Rover through traffic as Sienna drove like a woman possessed. All I could think about was Phoenix, my sweet, energetic 4-year-old grandson who loved dinosaurs and soccer and gave the best hugs. Please let him be okay, I prayed silently. Please. The emergency room at Seattle Children's Hospital was controlled chaos. Garrett and Sienna were already at the desk when I rushed in, demanding information about their son. A nurse led us back to a curtained area where Phoenix lay on a bed, his right arm at an odd angle, tears streaming down his face. A paramedic was with him, trying to keep him calm. Mommy. Daddy. Phoenix sobbed when he saw them. Then his eyes found me. Grandma B. I pushed past Garrett and Sienna and took Phoenix's good hand in mine. I'm here, sweetheart. Grandma's here. It hurts, he whimpered. I know, baby. I know. The doctors are going to help you feel better. Over the next 2 hours, we waited while Phoenix was examined, x-rayed, and diagnosed with a fractured radius. He needed a cast and pain medication, but he'd be okay. I held his hand through all of it. Sienna made phone calls, coordinating with work and arranging to pick up Callista from school. Garrett dealt with insurance and paperwork. But I was the one Phoenix wanted, the one he reached for when he was scared or hurting. By the time we left the hospital, Phoenix sporting a blue cast and slightly loopy from pain medication, it was after 5 p.m. Sienna had managed to get a colleague to pick up Callista and drop her off at the house. In the parking lot, we stood awkwardly by our cars, the argument from earlier hanging between us like unfinished business. Thank you, Garrett said quietly, for being there for him. I'll always be there when my grandchildren need me, I said. But there's a difference between being there in emergencies and being used as free labor every day. Sienna was uncharacteristically quiet, watching Phoenix doze in his car seat. When she finally spoke, her voice lacked its usual sharp edge. He kept asking for you. At the school, in the ambulance. He didn't want me. He wanted his Grandma B. I didn't say anything, just waited. I never really thought about what we were asking of you, she continued, not meeting my eyes. I mean, I knew it was a lot. But I justified it by telling myself you wanted to do it, that you loved spending time with them. I do love spending time with them. But love shouldn't be weaponized into exploitation. She nodded slowly. The spreadsheet. That was wrong. Reducing you to a cost analysis, that was dehumanizing, and I'm sorry. I hadn't expected an apology. I wasn't sure I completely believed it. But it was something. Sienna, I don't want to be cut out of their lives. But I also can't continue sacrificing my own well-being. I'm 73 years old. I need to take care of my health, maintain my own social connections, have some autonomy over my life. What if we hired a nanny? Garrett interjected. A real one, who we pay. And you could be their grandmother, see them when you want, on your terms. We can't afford a full-time nanny in Westbrook Academy tuition, Sienna said automatically, then caught herself. But maybe Westbrook isn't necessary. Maybe Phoenix would be just as happy at a good public school where he could play soccer and just be a kid. I looked at my son and daughter-in-law, seeing them perhaps clearly for the first time in 18 months. They were ambitious, status-conscious, and yes, they'd exploited me. But they were also scared, overwhelmed parents who'd taken the easy way out when I'd offered it. I think Phoenix would be much happier at a school where he could play soccer, I said gently. We stood there for a few more moments, the Seattle evening cool around us. So where do we go from here? Garrett asked. You figure out childcare that doesn't involve using me as free labor. I'll be their grandmother, I'll come for Sunday dinners, I'll babysit occasionally when it works for all of us, I'll be at school events and birthday parties and all the things grandmothers do. But I won't be their parent. That's your job. That seems fair, Sienna said quietly. And I'm moving back to Sarasota. Both of them looked shocked. What? When? Garrett asked. As soon as I can arrange it. I gave up my life here to help you, and in the process, I lost myself. I need to go home. The real home, not an apartment 3 blocks from your house where I exist solely to be available to you. But the kids. We'll visit during school breaks. We'll video chat regularly. I'll come up for important events. But I need to reclaim my own life, Garrett. I need to wake up in the morning as Beatrice, not as B, the optimal cost arrangement. Tears welled in Garrett's eyes, the first real emotion I'd seen from him beyond frustration and defensiveness. I'm sorry, Mom. I'm so sorry. I never meant to make you feel used. I know. But intent doesn't erase impact. Phoenix stirred in his car seat, calling out sleepily. Grandma? I walked over and leaned in, kissing his forehead gently. I'm here, sweetheart. Don't leave, he murmured, already drifting back to sleep. My heart broke a little. I'm not leaving, baby. Grandma will always be here when you need me. But in a different way. A better way. I stepped back and looked at Garrett and Sienna. Take him home. Give him his pain medication in 4 hours. Keep the cast dry. I'll call tomorrow to check on him. You're not coming to help tonight? Sienna asked, and for once it seemed like an actual question rather than an assumption. No. Tonight you're his parents. You've got this. I got in my car and drove back to my apartment, my hands shaking on the wheel. When I got inside, I turned my phone back on. There were 17 missed calls and 32 text messages. I ignored all of them and instead pulled up a real estate website, looking at condos for sale in Sarasota. Looking at a future that was mine again. 3 days later, I sat in a coffee shop near my apartment, waiting. I'd asked Garrett and Sienna to meet me here, neutral ground, away from their house where everything was tangled up in 18 months of accumulated resentment and obligation. They arrived together, both looking tired. I'd heard from Garrett that the past 3 days of juggling work and childcare without me had been difficult. Good. They needed to understand what they'd been taking for granted. How's Phoenix? I asked as they sat down. Loving the attention his cast is getting at school, Garrett said with a slight smile. He's had everyone sign it. And Callista? Confused about why you haven't been around, Sienna admitted. We tried to explain, but she's 6. She doesn't really understand. She doesn't need to understand the details. She just needs to know that Grandma loves her and will still be in her life. A server came and took our drink orders. After she left, we sat in uncomfortable silence for a moment. I wanted to talk about a few things before I finalize my plans, I said, pulling out a folder. First, I'm listing my apartment and moving back to Sarasota at the end of next month. I've already been in touch with a realtor in Florida. That's really happening? Garrett asked, though his tone suggested he'd been hoping I'd change my mind. It is. But I want to set up a schedule for visits. I was thinking the kids could come to Florida for a week during winter break, maybe 10 days in summer. And I'll come up here for Thanksgiving and alternating Christmas years. Sienna nodded, pulling out her phone to make notes. That works. Second, I want us to establish clear boundaries for when I do visit or babysit. I'm happy to watch them occasionally, date nights, special events, but it needs to be asked, not assumed. And I need at least a week's notice except for genuine emergencies. Understood, Garrett said. Third, you need to find permanent childcare. Not temporary, not just until things settle down. The kids need consistency, and you need to take full responsibility for their care. We've already called 3 nanny agencies, Sienna said. And we're touring daycares next week. We're also talking about one of us cutting back hours. Maybe going to an 80% schedule. I raised my eyebrows, surprised. That's a big change. Yeah, well. Phoenix's accident was a wake-up call. We've been so focused on our careers that we've barely been parenting. That needs to change. We talked for another hour, working through logistics and schedules. It was civil, almost businesslike. The warmth that should exist between a mother and son, between in-laws, was strained and tentative. But it was honest in a way our relationship hadn't been in 18 months. As we were preparing to leave, Sienna reached across the table and touched my hand. Beatrice, I really am sorry. For all of it. The spreadsheet was unconscionable, and the way I treated you was wrong. I hope someday you can forgive me. I looked at her, this ambitious, complicated woman who treated me so poorly but who was at least trying to acknowledge it. I appreciate the apology, I said. Forgiveness will take time. But I'm willing to work toward it if you're willing to do the work of being better. She nodded, tears in her eyes. Garrett walked me to my car. I'm going to miss having you close by, he said. I'm a phone call and a plane ride away. But Garrett, you need to be present for your children. They need you, not just your money. I know. We're going to do better. See that you do. I got in my car and watched them walk to theirs, heads together, talking. They had a long road ahead of them, figuring out how to actually parent their children, how to balance their ambitions with their family responsibilities, how to build a life that didn't require exploiting their relatives. But that was their journey now. Mine was back to Sarasota, back to my beach walks with Margaret, back to my book club and my painting classes and my own life. 6 weeks later, I stood on the beach near my new condo, not as nice as the one I'd sold, but comfortable and mine, watching the sun set over the Gulf of Mexico. My phone buzzed with a video call. Callista's face filled the screen. Grandma B. Look. I lost my front tooth. She grinned, showing the gap where her tooth had been. Oh my goodness. Did the tooth fairy come? She left me $5. And she wrote me a note. Phoenix pushed his way into frame, his cast now covered in colorful marker drawings. Grandma, guess what? I scored a goal at soccer today. You did? That's wonderful, sweetheart. We talked for 15 minutes, them telling me about their days, me telling them about the dolphins I'd seen that morning. When Garrett took the phone back, I could see their house in the background, different somehow. Less pristine, more lived in. There were toys on the floor, dishes in the sink. They miss you, Garrett said. We all do. I miss them too. But I'll see them in 2 weeks for Thanksgiving. Looking forward to it, Mom. And hey, thank you. For everything. But especially for teaching us that family isn't about obligation. It's about respect. After we hung up, I sat on my small balcony, listening to the waves, feeling the warm Florida breeze on my face. I'd lost 18 months to being useful instead of valued. But I'd reclaimed my life, my dignity, and my sense of self. And I'd taught my son and daughter-in-law an important lesson, that love without respect is just exploitation wearing a family face. The sun dipped below the horizon, painting the sky in shades of orange and pink. Tomorrow I'd meet Margaret for our morning beach walk. Tomorrow I'd be just Beatrice again, not to be the cost-saving measure. And that was more than enough. Epilogue. It's been 6 months since I moved back to Sarasota. Callista and Phoenix visited during winter break, and we had a wonderful time building sandcastles and hunting for shells. They're visiting again this summer for 2 weeks. Garrett and Sienna hired a wonderful nanny named Patricia who the kids adore. Sienna cut her hours to 80%, and Garrett started leaving work at 5 p.m. sharp. They enrolled Phoenix in a public school with an excellent soccer program, saving the tuition money for college instead. Our relationship is still healing. There's a wariness that wasn't there before, a recognition that what was broken can't be completely mended. But there's also honesty now. And respect. I'm painting again. I joined a new book club. I volunteer at the Literacy Center 3 days a week. I have my life back. Sometimes people ask me if I regret standing up for myself, if I wish I'd just continued being available to maintain easy access to my grandchildren. The answer is always no. Because I've learned that the most important relationship you can have is the one with yourself. And no amount of time with grandchildren is worth losing your own dignity, your own autonomy, your own sense of self. Family should be built on love and respect, not obligation and exploitation. And if it takes losing everything to reclaim your worth, then that's a price worth paying. I'm Beatrice Eleanor Thornwell. I'm 73 years old. I'm a retired teacher, a grandmother, a friend, and a person. Not a cost-benefit analysis. Not a line item in someone's budget. Not just a babysitter. A person. And I'm finally, wonderfully, myself again. 2 weeks had passed since the coffee shop meeting with Garrett and Sienna. 2 weeks of relative peace as I packed up my small Bellevue apartment, donated furniture I wouldn't need, and made arrangements for my return to Sarasota. Margaret had been ecstatic when I called to tell her I was coming home. "I knew you'd come back eventually," she'd said, her voice warm with affection. "That life up there never suited you, B. You're meant to be by the ocean, not freezing in Seattle rain." I'd laughed, feeling lighter than I had in months. My Florida condo, a smaller unit in the same complex I'd lived in before, would be ready for move-in at the end of the month. Everything was falling into place. Then my phone rang at 7:30 on a Tuesday morning. It was a number I didn't recognize, but the area code was local to Seattle. I almost didn't answer, but something made me press the green button. "Mrs. Thornwell? Beatrice Thornwell?" A woman's voice, professional and slightly hesitant. "Yes, this is Beatrice. My name is Jennifer Chen. I'm a social worker with Child Protective Services in King County. I'm calling about your grandchildren, Callista and Phoenix Morrison." My blood went cold. "What's wrong? Are they hurt?" "No, ma'am, they're not hurt. But there's been an incident at their home, and we need to speak with you about temporary placement options." "Temporary placement? I don't understand. Where are their parents?" There was a pause. "Mrs. Thornwell, are you available to come to our office this morning? This is a conversation that should happen in person." An hour later, I sat in a small, windowless conference room at the CPS office in downtown Seattle. Jennifer Chen sat across from me, along with another social worker named Marcus Rivera. Between them was a thick file folder with my son's name on it. "Mrs. Thornwell," Jennifer began gently, "I'm going to be direct with you because time is of the essence. Last night, we received a call from Seattle Children's Hospital. Phoenix was brought in by his father with injuries that raised concerns." "What kind of injuries?" "He broke his arm 2 weeks ago, but that was an accident at school." "These were different injuries," Marcus interrupted. "Bruising on his upper arms consistent with being grabbed forcefully. A handprint bruise on his shoulder." When hospital staff spoke with Phoenix alone, he said his mother had gotten very angry when he spilled juice on her laptop. I felt like the floor had dropped out from under me. "Sienna hurt him?" "We're still investigating. Mr. Morrison claims the bruises happened when Phoenix was roughhousing with another child at school, but the pattern doesn't support that explanation. And there are other concerns that have come to light." Jennifer opened the file folder and pulled out several documents. "Mrs. Thornwell, were you aware that CPS has received 3 previous reports about the Morrison household in the past 8 months? 3 reports? No, I had no idea." "What kind of reports?" "The first came from Callista's teacher in March. She reported that Callista came to school with what appeared to be a cigarette burn on her forearm. When asked about it, Callista said she'd touched her mother's curling iron. The teacher found the explanation questionable but didn't have enough evidence to pursue it." My hands were shaking. "Sienna doesn't smoke. And I never saw any burn on Callista's arm." The second report came from a neighbor in June who heard what sounded like a child screaming and objects being thrown. When police responded, Mr. Morrison said it was a television show playing too loudly. The officers noted no visible injuries on the children and left. "And the third?" "The third came from Phoenix's pediatrician in August. Phoenix had lost weight and seemed unusually withdrawn during a routine checkup. The pediatrician asked about home environment and Phoenix said his parents were always mad now. The doctor filed a report, but when we did a home visit, both children seemed fine and the house was in good order." I sat back in my chair, trying to process this information. I was there every day. How did I not see any of this? "Mrs. Thornwell," Jennifer said carefully, "based on our investigation, we believe the incidents escalated after you left. According to Mr. Morrison, He and his wife have been under severe stress trying to manage work and childcare without your help. He claims his wife has been having what he calls emotional outbursts related to that stress. So he's blaming me? He's saying this is my fault because I stopped being their free babysitter? We're not assigning blame, Marcus said. We're trying to understand the situation and ensure the children's safety. Right now, both children have been placed in emergency foster care while we complete our investigation. Foster care? They're with strangers? My voice rose despite my attempt to stay calm. They must be terrified. They're with an experienced foster family who specializes in emergency placements. They're safe and being well cared for. But Mrs. Thornwell, we're hoping you might be willing to take temporary custody while we sort this out. I stared at them. You want me to take them? You're their grandmother and by all accounts had a close relationship with them until recently. Mr. Morrison suggested you as a placement option, and both children have asked for you. My mind was racing. Just 2 weeks ago, I'd set boundaries. I'd reclaimed my life. I'd bought a plane ticket back to Florida. And now they wanted me to take on full-time care of 2 traumatized children. What about Garrett and Sienna? Where are they? Mr. Morrison is cooperating with the investigation and living in the family home. Mrs. Morrison has been asked to stay elsewhere while we assess the situation. She's currently staying at a hotel. Can I see the children? Jennifer nodded. They're at the foster home now. We can arrange a visit this afternoon if you're interested in considering placement. I don't need to consider. If my grandchildren need me, I'm there. But I need to understand what I'm agreeing to. How long would they be with me? Potentially several weeks while we complete our investigation and determine whether it's safe for them to return home. We'd also require the parents to complete anger management counseling and parenting classes before reunification could be considered. And if it's not safe for them to return? Another glance passed between the social workers. Then we'd explore longer-term placement options. But let's take this one step at a time. 3 hours later, I walked into a modest home in the Greenwood neighborhood. A kind-faced woman in her 50s named Carol greeted me at the door. They've been asking for you all morning, she said quietly. The little one, Phoenix, keeps saying he wants his grandma Bee. She led me to a playroom where Callista and Phoenix sat on the floor with coloring books they weren't really using. The moment they saw me, both children burst into tears and ran toward me. I dropped to my knees and wrapped my arms around them both, holding them as they sobbed against me. I'm here, babies. Grandma's here. I want to go home, Callista cried. I want my room and my stuffed animals. Why can't we go home? Phoenix asked, his cast-covered arm clutching my shirt. Did we do something bad? No, sweetheart. You didn't do anything bad. Sometimes grown-ups need help learning how to be better, and while they're learning, you're going to stay with Grandma. Would you like that? Phoenix nodded vigorously. Callista pulled back to look at me, her green eyes red and swollen from crying. Are you taking us to Florida? Daddy said you were moving away. Not yet, honey. Right now, I'm staying here with you. Over the next 2 hours, we talked, read stories, and I reassured them over and over that they were safe, loved, and that none of this was their fault. Carol pulled me aside before I left. They're good kids, she said. Polite, well-behaved. But Phoenix flinches whenever anyone raises their voice, and Callista asked me 3 times this morning if she was being good enough. Those aren't normal behaviors for children their age. How quickly can I get them out of here? No offense to you, I'm sure you're wonderful. But they need to be with family. CPS is fast-tracking your background check since you've been their primary caregiver for the past 18 months. You should be able to take them tomorrow, possibly tonight if everything clears quickly. It was 9 p.m. when Jennifer Chin called to tell me I'd been approved for temporary kinship placement. I could pick up the children first thing in the morning. I spent the night transforming my small apartment into a space suitable for 2 children. I bought an air mattress for them to share in my bedroom since I only had 1 bedroom. I stocked the refrigerator with their favorite foods. I bought coloring books and puzzles and anything I could think of to make them feel comfortable. But mostly, I tried not to think about what those bruises on Phoenix meant. About what might have been happening in that house after I left. About whether my setting boundaries had somehow triggered this. At 8 a.m. the next morning, I picked up Callista and Phoenix from Carol's house. They each had a small backpack with a few clothes the foster care system had provided. Everything else, their toys, their books, their familiar belongings, was still at the house in Medina. "Can we get my stuffed rabbit?" Callista asked as I buckled her into the borrowed car seat CPS had provided. "I can't sleep without Mr. Hops." "I'll see what I can arrange, sweetheart." I called Garrett on the drive back to my apartment. He answered on the first ring. "Mom. Thank God. Did you get the kids?" "I have them. They're asking for their things from home. Can I come by and pack some bags for them?" "Of course." "When?" "This afternoon, after they settle in a bit." There was a long pause. "Mom, I'm so sorry. This is all such a mess." "Garrett, did Sienna hurt Phoenix?" Another pause. "I don't know. Maybe. She's been under so much stress since you left, and she has a temper. But I never thought she'd actually." His voice broke. "I should have seen it. I should have protected them." "Yes, you should have. But right now, what matters is that they're safe. We'll deal with the rest later." At 3 p.m., I drove to the house in Medina with both children in the back seat. They were quiet as we pulled up the long driveway, their excitement at going home dampened by uncertainty. Garrett met us at the door. He looked terrible, unshaven, his eyes red-rimmed, his expensive suit replaced with sweatpants and an old t-shirt. "Daddy." Phoenix ran to him, and Garrett scooped him up carefully, mindful of his cast. "Hey, buddy. I missed you." His voice was thick with emotion. Callista hung back, staying close to me. When Garrett reached for her, she stepped behind my legs. "Callista, sweetheart, it's Daddy," Garrett said, his voice breaking. "I know," she said quietly. "But I want to stay with Grandma." The rejection on Garrett's face was painful to witness. "Okay. That's okay, honey. Grandma will take good care of you." We went inside, and I started helping the children gather their belongings. Clothes, toys, books, filling bags with the familiar things that would help them feel secure in my small apartment. While the kids were upstairs in their rooms, Garrett pulled me aside in the kitchen. "CPS called this morning. They're recommending that Sienna not have unsupervised contact with the children for at least 6 months. She has to complete anger management therapy and parenting classes. And I have to do parenting classes too." "Good," I said firmly. "I failed them, Mom. I was so focused on work, on our lifestyle, on keeping Sienna happy, I didn't see what was happening right in front of me." "Where is Sienna now?" "Still at the hotel. She's refusing to admit she did anything wrong. She keeps saying the bruises were accidental, that Phoenix is clumsy, that CPS is overreacting." He ran his hands through his hair. "I think our marriage is over. I can't trust her around my children. That's a decision only you can make." "But Garrett, those kids need to be your priority now. Not your career, not your social status, not your marriage. Your children." "I know. And Mom, I know I have no right to ask this, but how long can you keep them? I know you were supposed to move back to Florida." I looked at my son, this man I'd raised alone, this person I'd sacrificed so much for, who had taken me for granted and allowed his wife to exploit me. And I saw something I hadn't seen in years, genuine remorse and the willingness to change. "I'll keep them as long as they need me," I said quietly. "Not because you're pressuring me. Not because I owe you anything. But because those children deserve stability and love, and I'm in a position to provide that right now." "Thank you. I'll pay you. Whatever the going rate is for childcare, I'll pay it. And I'll cover your rent here, groceries, anything you need. We'll work out the details." "But Garrett, this time there are boundaries. I'm not your employee. I'm their grandmother doing you a favor while you and Sienna get your act together. Clear expectations, clear communication, and absolute respect for my time and my needs. Absolutely. Whatever you need. Over the next 3 weeks, a routine emerged. The children stayed with me full-time. Garrett had supervised visitation with them 3 times a week, 2 hours each time, with a CPS caseworker present. Sienna had 1 supervised visit per week, also with a caseworker, though Phoenix refused to see her and Callista would only agree if I was there too. I enrolled them in a small private school near my apartment, paid for by Garrett, where they could get extra support as they processed their trauma. They both started seeing a child therapist twice a week. Slowly, I began to see glimpses of the children they'd been before: Phoenix's infectious laugh when we played dinosaurs, Callista's creative storytelling during our evening reading time. But there were hard moments too. Phoenix had nightmares several nights a week, waking up screaming for me. Callista had developed an anxious habit of asking, "Is this okay? Am I being good?" about everything she did, seeking constant reassurance. My life in Florida was on hold. Margaret was disappointed but understanding. "Those babies need you right now," she'd said when I called to explain. "Florida will still be here when you're ready." I'd canceled my plane ticket, put my Florida condo on hold, and settled into this unexpected chapter of my life. 1 month after taking custody, Jennifer Chin called me into her office for an update. "Mrs. Thornwell, I wanted to let you know that our investigation is concluding. We have enough evidence to substantiate physical abuse by Mrs. Morrison. The bruises on Phoenix, combined with the previous reports and interviews with the children, paint a clear picture. What happens now? Mrs. Morrison will be required to complete an extensive treatment program before she can have unsupervised contact with her children. Mr. Morrison can have unsupervised visitation and is working toward having the children returned to his care, but that won't happen until he completes his parenting classes and we're confident he can protect them. How long will that take? Realistically, 3 to 6 months for unsupervised visits with Mr. Morrison. Potentially a year or more for reunification with both parents, if that even happens. Some families don't survive this kind of crisis." I nodded, processing this information. "And the children can stay with me during all of this?" "If you're willing, yes. You've been wonderful with them. They're clearly thriving in your care." That evening, I sat on my small balcony after the children were asleep, looking out at the Seattle skyline and thinking about the strange turn my life had taken. I'd set boundaries to reclaim my life, and that decision had potentially saved my grandchildren from ongoing abuse. If I'd still been there, working 14-hour days, would I have noticed? Would I have been able to stop it? Or would my presence have just continued enabling Garrett and Sienna's dysfunction? My phone buzzed with a text from Margaret. "How are my favorite great-grands doing? Send pictures." I smiled and sent her a photo from earlier that day, Callista and Phoenix making silly faces while we baked cookies together. Margaret's response came quickly: "They're lucky to have you, B. And for what it's worth, I think you're exactly where you're supposed to be right now." Maybe she was right. This wasn't the retirement I'd planned. But standing up for myself had created a domino effect that ultimately protected 2 vulnerable children. Sometimes the bravest thing we can do is say no. And sometimes the consequences of that brave choice take us exactly where we're needed most. 3 months later, I stood in a courtroom in King County, dressed in my best outfit, watching as a judge reviewed paperwork for what felt like an eternity. Garrett sat behind me with his lawyer. Sienna was absent. She'd moved back to California to live with her parents while completing her court-mandated treatment program. Their divorce was proceeding. "Mrs. Thornwell," Judge Patricia Martinez said, looking up at me over her reading glasses. "I've reviewed the case file, the reports from CPS, the children's therapist's recommendations, and Mr. Morrison's progress reports. I'm prepared to make a ruling on the custody arrangement." My heart pounded. For the past 3 months, I'd had temporary kinship care. Today would determine the children's future. "Mr. Morrison," the judge continued, turning to Garrett. You've completed your parenting classes and shown genuine commitment to addressing the failures that led to this situation. Your visitation reports are positive, and both children have expressed a desire to spend more time with you. Garrett nodded, looking nervous. However, Judge Martinez continued, I'm not comfortable with full-time reunification at this time. The children have stability with Mrs. Thornwell, and uprooting them again would be detrimental. She turned back to me. Mrs. Thornwell, the children's therapist reports that both Callista and Phoenix feel safe with you and have made significant progress in processing their trauma. Their teachers report they're thriving academically and socially. You've created a nurturing environment despite significant personal sacrifice. I held my breath. Therefore, I'm granting Mrs. Thornwell continued primary physical custody for the next 6 months, with Mr. Morrison having progressive visitation as follows: supervised visits twice weekly for 1 month, then unsupervised day visits for 2 months, then overnight visits for 3 months. At the 6-month mark, we'll reassess whether full reunification with Mr. Morrison is appropriate. Relief flooded through me. 6 more months. 6 months to continue helping these children heal. Additionally, the judge continued, I'm ordering Mr. Morrison to provide financial support for Mrs. Thornwell's housing, the children's expenses, and a monthly stipend of $4,000 in recognition of the full-time care she's providing. Garrett nodded. Yes, Your Honor. Absolutely. Mrs. Thornwell, do you have any questions? Just one, Your Honor. In 6 months, if Garrett is ready and the children are comfortable, I'd like to return to my retirement in Florida. Is that possible? If the children are ready and Mr. Morrison has demonstrated consistent, appropriate parenting, yes. However, Mrs. Thornwell, I want to be clear, you're under no legal obligation to continue this arrangement if it becomes detrimental to your own well-being. Your sacrifice is noted and appreciated, but you also deserve to live your life. After the hearing, Garrett and I stood in the courthouse hallway. Thank you, Mom. For everything. I didn't do this for you, Garrett. I did it for Callista and Phoenix. I know. And I'm going to prove to you, and to them, that I can be the father they deserve. He hesitated. I've cut back to a 60% schedule at work. I'm in therapy. I'm rebuilding my entire life to be what they need. Good. That's what they deserve. In 6 months, when they're ready to come home, I hope you'll still visit. I hope we can rebuild our relationship too. I looked at my son, seeing the man he was trying to become rather than the one who'd exploited me. One step at a time, Garrett. Right now, let's focus on those kids. 6 months later, final epilogue. The Florida sun was warm on my face as I sat on my balcony, watching pelicans dive for fish in the Gulf of Mexico. My coffee was perfect this morning, the expensive kind I could now afford thanks to the 6 months of financial support Garrett had provided. On my phone, a video call was connecting. Callista's face appeared first, then Phoenix pushed into frame. Grandma B. Guess what? Dad said we can come visit you for spring break. That's wonderful. We'll go to the beach every day and hunt for shells. And build sandcastles? Phoenix asked. The biggest sandcastles you've ever seen. Garrett appeared behind them, his hand on Phoenix's shoulder. Say goodbye to Grandma, kids. Time for homework. After they ran off, Garrett lingered on the screen. They're doing really well, Mom. Phoenix hasn't had a nightmare in 3 weeks. Callista's teacher says she's one of the most confident kids in her class now. That's because they have what they needed all along, a parent who's present and engaged. I couldn't have gotten here without you. Without your tough love, honestly. If you hadn't set those boundaries, hadn't forced us to face our failures, he shook his head. I don't want to think about where we'd be. How's Sienna? She completed her program. She's in therapy and working on herself. But she signed away her parental rights 3 months ago. Said she wasn't cut out for motherhood and didn't want to damage the kids further by forcing herself into their lives. That was probably the most honest and selfless thing she's ever done. Yeah. The kids ask about her occasionally, but they're okay with it. They know she's not able to be a good mom right now, and maybe not ever. After we hung up, I walked down to the beach where Margaret was waiting for our morning walk. "How are the littles?" she asked, linking her arm through mine. "Thriving. They'll be here in 2 weeks for spring break." "And you? How are you doing with all this?" I thought about the question. The past 9 months had been exhausting, taking in traumatized children, navigating the court system, putting my retirement on hold yet again. But this time was different. This time I'd had boundaries, financial support, and respect. This time I'd been valued, not just used. "I'm good," I said honestly. "Better than good. I helped save my grandchildren from a terrible situation. I taught my son what real parenting looks like. And I did it on my terms, without sacrificing my dignity. And now you're finally really retired?" "Finally really retired. The kids will visit several times a year, and I'll go up for holidays. But this time, I'm the grandmother I should have always been, loving, present, but not responsible for raising them." We walked in comfortable silence for a while, our bare feet in the warm sand, the Gulf breeze in our hair. "You know what the craziest part is?" I said eventually. "If I hadn't stood up for myself, hadn't refused to be just a babysitter, I wouldn't have seen what was really happening in that house. My boundary setting might have felt selfish at the time, but it ended up protecting those children." "Sometimes the bravest thing we can do is choose ourselves," Margaret said. "Not because we don't love others, but because we recognize that we can't help anyone if we've disappeared into servitude." I squeezed her arm. "When did you get so wise?" "Oh, I've always been this wise. You were just too busy being exploited to notice." We both laughed, and it felt good. Natural. Free. That evening, I sat on my balcony with a book I'd been trying to read for 6 months, actually reading it this time, not just using it as a prop while I worried about everyone else. My phone buzzed with a text from Callista. "I miss you, Grandma B. Can't wait for spring break. I love you to the moon and back." I smiled and typed back, "I love you to the moon and back and all the way around the stars, sweet girl. See you soon." Another text came through, this time from Garrett. "The kids are asking if we can start a tradition of Sunday video calls with you. What do you think?" "I think that sounds perfect," I replied. And it did. Because this was what healthy family relationships looked like: boundaries respected, communication clear, love given freely rather than extracted through obligation. I was 73 years old. I'd spent 18 months being exploited, 9 months helping my grandchildren heal, and now I was finally, truly, myself again. I was Beatrice Eleanor Thornwell. Retired teacher. Grandmother. Friend. Survivor. Not a cost-benefit analysis. Not a line item. Not just a babysitter. A person worthy of respect. A woman who'd reclaimed her dignity. A grandmother who'd learned that sometimes the most loving thing you can do is say no. The sun set over the Gulf in brilliant shades of orange and purple, painting the sky like a masterpiece. Tomorrow I'd meet Margaret for our walk. Tomorrow I'd attend my book club. Tomorrow I'd paint in my studio corner and volunteer at the literacy center and live my life on my own terms. But tonight, I sat with my book and my coffee and my peace, grateful for the journey that had brought me here. It had taken losing everything to understand what really mattered. And what mattered was simple: being valued for who you are, not just what you can provide. Family is supposed to be built on love and respect. And if it takes burning everything down to rebuild it properly, then that's a fire worth starting. I smiled, turned the page of my book, and felt the warm Florida breeze on my face. This was freedom. This was dignity. This was life on my terms. And it was perfect. Thank you for following Beatrice's complete journey from exploitation to empowerment. If this story resonated with you, share it with someone who needs to hear that it's never too late to reclaim your worth. Remember, you deserve to be valued, not just used. Drop a comment below telling me what you thought, and share what city you're watching from so I can see how far Beatrice's story has traveled. Sometimes the bravest thing we can do is choose ourselves, not because we don't love others, but because we recognize that we matter too.